5, 4,
3,
2,
1.
but who's counting, right? And his name is Major.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen,
please welcome Major Garrett.
From the nation's capital.
Major, fantastic.
It's The Takeout.
This is a major achievement.
With CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent,
Major Garrett, yes, CBS, yes, hi.
Major Garrett.
Major, that's nonsense, and you should know better.
Is Major out of the doghouse?
The answer is yes.
Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast week. You know, I like to say about this program that The Takeout has, at times, convening authority. Well, we've convened an enormously important voice in my life, maybe in yours, but certainly in mine. Rob Manfred. Who is he? He's the commissioner of Major League Baseball, and we're at Major League Baseball headquarters, right in Midtown New York City. Right over my shoulder, you see 6th Avenue, or you see over the commissioner's shoulder, 6th Avenue. Mr. Commissioner, it's great to have you with us.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
So, as you well know, and anyone who knows anything about baseball knows, it has a long history. And some of the economic issues we're going to talk about also have a long history. With your permission, Mr. Commissioner, I'd like to skip over the long history part and really talk about the future of baseball in terms of economics, in terms of things that fans really care about. So let's start with something that's on fans' minds, like mine. I'm a San Diego Padres fan. I've read all the headlines. Regional sports networks are dying. I may not be able to see my favorite team this season. What can you tell us about where that stands and what fans should expect and what your goals as commissioner are in that space?
Well, the RSN model is certainly challenged as a result of the changes.
Real quickly, for those regional sports networks were on cable, they were bundled. That was one of the reasons people got cable. Cord cutters now, the revenue's down, they're stressed.
Exactly.
That's a quick summary.
Yeah, I think that's a very good quick summary, actually. Our view is this. We hope that the regionals figure out a way to pay the sums that they are contracted to pay to our teams and continue to broadcast. We are not interested in reducing the revenue that we receive from the RSNs for the simple reason that we believe in the fundamental value of the content. The question is, how do you monetize that content? We hope that we wish them the best. I mean, we really do want them to succeed, but from our perspective, the number one priority was to put ourselves in a position where we could say unequivocally, if an RSN decides it can no longer broadcast, we will be in a position to step in and make sure that our fans see the games.
And when you say we, you mean Major League Baseball?
I do. I think the
Does that mean Major League Baseball gets into the production side of the game?
Well, you know, we have production capacity
With
already
Major League
at
Baseball
the
Network?
MLB Network, but we've actually hired a staff, including the individual that ran the Fox RSNs at one time. We would produce games using the capacity we have at the network. We would attempt, and I think would be successful in making agreements with distributors to carry the games just like they do today.
And that would be a short-term fix.
Well, yeah, it would be a cable-based fix. And let me come back to that in just a second. But we would also offer the games digitally. You know, we were the first over-the-top product with MLB.TV. We would simply open that product up in market. So from a fan's perspective, it would actually be better, right? If you're a cable person, you could still get the games on cable. If you'd cut the cord, you would have an in-market digital option that does not exist today. And let me say, just to go back on the cable bundle for just a second, while the RSNs are challenged, there is going to be a remaining cable bundle for some significant period of time. It's not going to go to zero, right? It's going to be smaller. But there are economics in that, and people, more importantly than the economics, who are cable people and are going to stay cable people. I happen to be one of those.
I do too, yes.
So, you know, our goal is to make sure, number one, that our fans never miss an opportunity to see our games. And if rights end up coming back to us, to get into a distribution system where we offer opportunities, better opportunities to even more fans.
Okay. Let's talk about something that I know you worked hard when you campaigned for this job, which you did. That's how you become commissioner. The owners vote you in. You were prioritizing then speed of game. Now there have been significant rules changes. Those of you who care about this show know what the rules changes are. We're not going to spend any time on that, but I would like you to explain the journey that went into the rules changes. Because I understand not only were you deeply involved, but it was kind of an interesting journey.
It was interesting. Going back to 2014 when I was elected, we did some fundamental research with fans. Got the idea of doing that research really from owners who were talking about what they were seeing with respect to the game. What we found when we talked to our fans is that there were attributes of the way the game was being played that were not positive.
They were not attributes. They were detriments.
Yeah, right.
They were a drag.
It was too long. There was not enough action.
Yep.
The athleticism of our great players was not fully on display. And I thought, as part of the election process, it's important to convey to the owners that I was not looking to change baseball. I was actually looking to get baseball back
To the game that I recognized as a kid growing up in the 60s, 70s, and
You
in
said
the 80s.
better than I did. You really did. I mean, and that's what it was about from the beginning.
And one thing I would say, Mr. Commissioner, is what was bothering me about baseball was it had become too linear. A strikeout is a linear thing.
Right.
A home run is a linear thing. Baseball operates best, most beautifully, geometrically. You have to see the geometry of the game.
100%. The game had become less dimensional, and I think that was to the detriment of our fans. As with anything in baseball, change is not easy. When you're changing things on the field, it's important, whether it's legally required or not, important to have the support of the players in terms of the changes you're making. The last thing you want to do is make a change, have the players opposed to it. The play on the field is disruptive in a way that's not good for fans. You want to avoid that. So we began on a process that really had two tracks. One, we began talking to the Players Association about the need for change, why we wanted to do it. And, baseball has a unique opportunity in the minor league system. It gives us the ability to experiment on a smaller stage. I mean, a lot of people go to watch minor league baseball.
Most definitely.
Tens of millions every year, but it doesn't have, obviously, the profile that Major League Baseball does. So we began experimenting with rules. We learned a lot. I mean, we had ideas. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. We refined them, and that was a very, very important.
And that was also a signal to the major league players, hey, this is probably coming.
More a signal, but more than a signal. If you think about it, this process went on for 8 years. Right. So almost, I can't give you an exact percentage, but a very large percentage of our players had played under some version of these rules. And when you've experienced something, it's a lot easier to accept that change than it is when it's the great unknown. You've never experienced. And particularly, remember, it's important to think about change on the field from a player's perspective. Players at the absolute pinnacle of a pyramid that starts huge at the bottom with most 8-year-olds in America playing some form of baseball, and they get to the absolute peak.
Apex.
And the notion that you're going to change something creates a fear that change is going to alter their status in the game. So
and their rhythm, their finicky, their sense of routine.
Routine is the right word. I mean, baseball players are creatures of habit and routine. It's an everyday game. It's kind of one of the features of the game. Anyways, so we work.
I'm going to look at the clock right now, Mr. Commissioner, because I know I can feel you getting to the next stage, and I want to give that ample room. So we've got about 15 seconds before we go to break, folks. Just to set the stage again, we're at Major League Baseball headquarters. Rob Manfred has been kind enough to sit down and talk. We're going to get all about baseball. It's a game I love. It's our America's pastime. No politics, only baseball. Here at the Takeout, I'm Major Garrett, back with Rob Manfred in just 1 second.
We're running 237 right now compared to a 304 average from last year.
From CBS News, this is The Takeout with Major Garrett.
Welcome back to The Takeout. We're at Major League Baseball headquarters. You know, if you go to a Major League Baseball game and you catch a foul ball, which I hope you do sometime in your life, if you catch one right now, you look at the baseball, you'll see a signature. Robert D. Manfred Jr., Commissioner of Baseball. He's our special guest. Okay, continue the story about the evolution of the rules changes and adaptability of the players.
So the next big break really came as part of the negotiations that we had last winter
For the collective bargaining agreement.
and in the course of those negotiations, there was a set of processes that are in the contract to deal with rule changes that were altered. They were altered in a way that I think provided more ongoing dialogue directly between owners and players on these changes, and a more definitive process. There's a voting process at the end where, you know, it's up or down. Are we doing this or not doing it? I should also mention umpires involved in that process as well.
Because they play a very big role in this.
A huge role in terms of managing the day-to-day change. You know,
Yeah, they have a lot of responsibilities now.
Huge.
Their workload has gone up, and how they manage it will be part of this story.
And, you know, they have been, they've done a great job, and we can talk about that. But the process worked the way we hoped it would when we negotiated, and there was a vote that authorized us to proceed with the three big rule changes for this year. I think that the two most important things about the rollout. Number one, the rollout followed and has followed to date the pattern that we saw in the minor leagues. You know, there were violations early. People got used to it. The violations have gone down, and, you know, you're down under kind of one a game, which is not significant really in terms of the play on the field. And we did get the kind of outcomes that we were hoping for, the kind of 30-minute-ish reduction in game time.
As I understand it, Mr. Commissioner, you keep track of this every day.
We do. You know, I get a report every morning as to how we're doing.
2 hours and 30 minutes, 232, 233. What's the average of the night before?
We're running 237 right now compared to a 304 average from last year. So it's running about 30 minutes. We've seen an uptick in batting average, particularly for left-handed batters because of the elimination of the shift, an increase in stolen base attempts, and a higher percentage of successful attempts, which is, you know, people are attributing it to the bases. That's part of it, but the limitation on pickoff attempts, which is part of the pitch clock protocol, also very important. So that was great that it was consistent. You know, we played 8,000 games in the minor leagues. We thought we knew what was going to happen, but you never, until you get, you know, the big leagues are different. So
and very little player pushback.
Well, that was the second point I was going to make. The players I cannot say enough about. In terms of the adjustment, they reaffirm what we all know. They're great athletes, and if you tell them what the rules are, they're going to adjust to them. But more than that, I think the players were very positive publicly about the rule changes, and I think they were positive about them in a way that made our fans feel like they were doing this to help the fans, which is a great message for us.
Do you expect this to have any materially important effect on television ratings?
Oh, I think that our ratings will improve. I think that when you think about the way we were playing, the lack of, every time you had a lack of action in the game, it was an opportunity to tune away. And we know when people tune away,
they don't come
not
back.
Everybody comes back.
Nope,
so, yeah, I do think it will have an impact. I know sitting in ballparks, I mean, you know, usually when I'm in a ballpark, I'm doing business of some sort.
I'm
you know,
sure that's true.
People would talk to me, and, you know, last year or all the years before that, I never felt like I was missing something. And all of a sudden, this year, starting with the spring training games, it's like, you got to give me a minute here. There's something going on.
We just missed 4 plays.
You miss plays.
Exactly.
And I think that's good for the product. Really good for the product.
So, I live in Washington, D.C. I'm a nominal Nationals fan. I'm a San Diego Padres fan. But you have 2 franchises and one long-running, separate regional sports network hassle. I don't need to tell you about that. The history of that, it's stuck in the courts, all that. But there are questions now about will that arrangement, whatever it is, affect the viability of the Baltimore Orioles? Will they be sold if there's a change in the underlying television economics for that Mid-Atlantic Sports Network? What can you tell my audience about that? Because a lot of people in D.C. will listen to this show.
I think that both Baltimore and Washington are viable franchises, notwithstanding the dispute over Mass. And I don't think anybody has to worry about there not being the Baltimore Orioles. They're one of our iconic franchises. They're going to be there. Look, I think while the agreement, let me use the probably ill-conceived at the beginning. I'm glad to say it was not my project. And it has spawned this long-running dispute. I do think certain developments, including the changes in the RSN market, the litigation where it is, kind of point to the idea that there's going to be a resolution sooner rather than later.
This year?
I hope this year. I really do hope this year. I think that it would be good for both franchises to get this situation resolved and start to move into the next phase.
Is the ownership of the Washington Nationals something that's going to be changed this baseball season?
Well, they've put the sale process on hold. Right. I think eventually there will be a sale process.
Was there something in particular that gummed that up?
Well, I think that the combination of the change in the family, Ted Lerner's passing, I think the feeling was, they needed to take a step back, take a deep breath. I don't think the Masson situation was a positive in terms of that sale process. And if, in fact, I'm right that there are dynamics in place that it might get resolved, that would be positive for the sale process.
Will the Orioles be put up for sale anytime soon?
I think John Angelos and the Angelos family
they've made public commitments, but there's all these rumblings.
Yeah, I know there's been rumblings out there, and I know why. I don't see that right now. Usually when we have a seller, John's telling me he's not selling. He's saying to me privately what he's saying publicly. And, usually you see some internal signs, and I'm not seeing that right now.
Will the Oakland A's move to Las Vegas?
Oakland needs a stadium deal done. They continue to proceed on parallel paths. The best I can tell you about Las Vegas is it is a serious alternative. It's serious enough that I made a trip to Las Vegas myself in January to assure the new governor that we were serious about this. They don't have an agreement yet, but I think Las Vegas would be a great market for baseball. I really do believe that.
What have you learned as a commissioner of the experience of the NFL and the NHL in Las Vegas?
I think that the experience of both leagues has been really positive in terms of the market kind of outpunching its population numbers, to be candid. I think it'd be a great spot for us. And I think there's interest in and certainly room for baseball in Vegas.
Will baseball expand in the near future?
I think the best way to answer that is Tampa and Oakland need to be resolved.
Right. You feeling good about Tampa? I've heard some more positive things about the new stadium there, and that franchise staying.
Yeah, I give Stu Sternberg A+ for diligence on that project. He stayed at it. I do think Tampa's a major league market.
With a great organization.
Yeah, they do a phenomenal job with the resources they have available. And I do think that a new facility in the right location would might be kind of scary for the rest of baseball. Give them additional resources, and given how well they've done, they could be very difficult opponent for a lot of people.
For those in Nashville, Portland, who constantly see their names mentioned, what can you tell them?
Look, I personally have said I see a lot of advantages to 32 teams. It certainly helps in terms of scheduling, just the even numbers. I think it creates an opportunity where you could look at your alignment. One of the problems we run into in the postseason, we have those 4 window days, And, inevitably we end up with, New York and Oakland playing each other. And it's very hard to schedule that game in a way that doesn't make it tough on the people on the East Coast or the people on the West Coast. If we got into a more geographic realignment, I think you could reduce your travel and play up east to west like most of the other sports.
The voice of Rob Manfred, Commissioner of Major League Baseball. We're here at Major League Baseball headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. I'm Major Garrett. Segment 3 of The Takeout coming up in just a second.
Internationalization of our sport is a crucial strategic objective for the game.
From CBS News, this is The Takeout with Major Garrett.
Welcome back to The Takeout. Rob Manfred is our special guest, Commissioner of Major League Baseball. Let's talk about betting.
Okay.
It has a troubled history in Major League Baseball, yet it's all over the place now. Are you confident that these two can coexist and the game not in any way, shape, or form be contaminated by it?
I am. I think it begins with the fact that baseball has always recognized that the rules that apply to people who work and play in the game have to be very strict and prohibit any participation in sports betting. And those rules have been maintained. I think that the development of technology surrounding sports betting, allows you to monitor what's going on in a very effective way, which we do. We spend a lot of money doing it to make sure that we're protecting.
What are you monitoring?
Betting behavior. Yeah,
okay.
And you can, it is possible to, detect patterns that would suggest that you have a problem and then investigate them. And we spend a lot of time and money at that to make sure.
On a regular, ongoing basis?
All the time, all the time. It's...
and the preponderance of online betting has made things like Las Vegas less problematic for professional leagues.
Yeah, I think that the realization that there can be legalized sports betting and still have adequate protection of the integrity of the game has made Las Vegas an easier choice for us. And the fact of the matter is, as you point out, if you want a sports bet, you can pretty much do it anywhere now. So now remember, and I think it is important to point this out, we actually were the plaintiff one of the plaintiffs in the case that ultimately went to the Supreme Court and legalized sports betting. We were trying to prohibit it or continue it being prohibited. But, at some point you have to accept the legal framework that you're operating in and take advantage of the business opportunities associated with it.
One thing that you mentioned in the last segment that I want to double back on, because you said you are in favor generally of 32 teams in the league. That would you got to expand to do that.
Right.
Is there a timetable for that?
It's no timetable that's even can be articulated until we know we have Tampa and Oakland resolved.
Those have to be resolved.
Yeah, that's kind of the threshold issue.
And is that something that you hope resolves itself or can be resolved this calendar year?
I'm hopeful.
In both cases?
For the first time since I've been commissioner, I'm hopeful that both will get resolved in 23. Resolved in the sense that they have agreements as to what's going to happen.
Right. And if I hear you reading between the lines, Oakland's window is closing, Las Vegas's window is opening.
Yeah, look, I'm not foreclosing the possibility in Oakland. That's really John Fisher's decision at the end of the day. I will say this, the pace in Oakland has been slow, would be a kind word.
Glacial.
That's a good word. I wasn't going to use it. It did come to mind. I was going to avoid it, but you said it, not me.
Let me talk to you about beer. 4 teams have announced, because games are ending more quickly, that they are going to sell beer up until the 8th inning. You don't have any control over this. Do you have a thought on this? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I think I think our clubs in general have good programs about responsible drinking to promote, a family atmosphere in our ballpark. I think those programs will continue, whether it's the 7th inning or the 8th inning. I'm not sure it materially changes. I mean, I think the other thing that is relevant to this, so many of our ballparks now, they have surrounding entertainment areas. So, what we do in the ballpark is only so relevant, because
My beloved San Diego Padres, Petco Park is very near the gas lamp quarter. If you go to Fenway Park, the entire area around Fenway. Wrigley Field is that way. Yankee Stadium to a lesser extent. Certainly Citi Field isn't quite as much, but many of them do have kind of either, if not festival atmospheres, something that's approximating that.
Maybe the best of them all, Truist Park in Atlanta. I mean, great entertainment district. I mean, look, the World Series has its own, thrilling atmosphere no matter where it is. I will tell you, the World Series in Atlanta with the activity in the Battery, the surrounding development, really made that World Series unique and pretty special.
The Padres will be playing in Mexico City this April, this month, later on this month. What is your thoughts, Commissioner, about the expansion, not of Major League Baseball in the United States, but as an international sport?
Look, I think that internationalization of our sport is a crucial strategic objective for the game. We have tried to be thoughtful about targets. We think Mexico provides a great opportunity for us, not only in Mexico, but in terms of developing and bringing at least some more Mexican players to our game. We think that, that Mexican presence in our game domestically helps us with a largely Mexican-American population. The affinity associated with that, really important. Europe has been a priority for us for a long time. I think
Cubs and Cardinals will play in London.
Cubs and Cardinals will be in London. We'll be London, Paris, London in the next 4 years. I think one of the biggest setbacks, maybe is the best word, from the pandemic was the loss of momentum
internationally
in London.
In London.
Yeah, in particular, we had taken the Yankees and the Red Sox. It was wildly successful. I mean, just things like merchandise sales. We sold more merchandise in London in 2 days than we do in an All-Star weekend. I mean, it was just wildly popular. We felt like we had momentum in Europe, where there's obviously the kind of disposable income that's important for an entertainment product, and to not be able to go back for a couple of years was unfortunate. But we're going to recapture that magic this summer.
What do you say, Mr. Commissioner, to those who say the World Baseball Classic is a joke? It's an injury factory, and it ought not to be played.
They ought to come to Miami and see the atmosphere in the ballpark for the semifinals and finals that we had, and quite frankly, for the early round that was played there with the Dominicans, the Puerto Ricans, and the Venezuelans. It was a great atmosphere in the ballpark. In terms of internationalizing the game, we had multiple games where we had more than 45% of the homes in Japan, in the whole country, tuned into these games. We have a product there that can really drive international interest in our sport and provide funding for development activities that are really important to the sport. On the injury issue, it's interesting. I was with 3 Padres yesterday, and I won't name them but I talked to them about the injury issue. Also talked to a member of the Mets while I was out at Citi Field, and the player reaction was exactly the same. They said, it's unfortunate if somebody gets hurt in the WBC, but don't forget, people get hurt in spring training.
Rhys Hoskins got hurt for the Phillies,
right,
fielding a grounder at first base.
Look, I think I never want to see
in a spring training game. Is my point, ladies and gentlemen.
I never want to see a player get hurt.
Of course not.
And I understand for the teams involved, it's a loss that can be, very, very difficult to accept. Having said that, the upside of the WBC in terms of the growth and internationalization of our sport, it's worth the risk.
It's not going anywhere.
No, we'll be back. We will be back with the WBC.
So we've got about a minute before we go, so I'm going to set you up on this question, but a couple of people have suggested to me, going back to the Regional Sports Network, that there's a clause, the Commissioner's Best Interest Clause, that gives you not supernatural powers, but powers that in times of distress, you can resolve a situation. So before we go to break, I'm just going to ask you the question. You can answer it on the other side of it. Do you have powers sufficient under that clause to resolve these things in a way that would be more transparent, more rapid, and more reassuring to fans? I'm Major Garrett. We're at Major League Baseball headquarters. Rob Manfred is going to chew over that question during this very brief break, give us the answer on the other side. And while I'm at it, let's just say this. So I played lots of sports. You don't care about that, ladies and gentlemen. I played hockey and soccer more successfully, but there's no sport I played longer than baseball or love playing more than baseball. That's one of the reasons I'm here. We'll see you on the other side of this break. Segment 4 coming up.
Minor League Baseball continues to play, obviously, a crucial role in our development process. For a lot of people, their live baseball option is minor league baseball.
From CBS News, this is The Takeout with Major Garrett.
He's not the great and all-powerful Oz, but he's close in Major League Baseball. His name is Rob Manfred. Commissioner Manfred, the question I put to you. Do you have Commissioner's best interest clause powers to resolve these matters?
Well, let me say this. I think that, first of all, from a fan's perspective, the single most important topic is that the assurance that they're going to be able to see their games no matter how the bankruptcy unfolds. And we have been extraordinarily transparent about the fact that we have made preparations. We have people who have done this before. We are staffed up and have the capacity to step in if it becomes necessary. So from the fans' perspective, I feel like they should feel protected. And that's why we made public our position with respect to the RSNs. Internally, I would say this. I think that we have had, kind of unwavering support from ownership for our approach with respect to the RSNs. I think one of the reasons for it, I think we have the right approach, number one. But more important than that, we saw this problem coming. When
You are not flat-footed.
No, when Sinclair purchased the RSNs, the purchase price was, give or take, $10.5 billion.
Daffy.
They put $8.5 billion of debt on that $10.5 billion business. We knew from the beginning.
Don't do that, folks. At home,
that
don't do that.
We needed to be thinking about, what could happen, what might be next. At the same time, I have a great local media committee. Tom Warner from the Red Sox, Obvious Television, Terry McGurk from the Braves, who was Turner Sports for forever, and Mark Walter from the Dodgers. And as we began to think about it, the strategy that we developed was triage, right? Make sure that you keep the games out there.
Right.
But then begin to articulate to the clubs a distribution model, a new distribution model that addressed some of the shortcomings that we're seeing in the regional sports network model, the most important of which is reach. We're just not in enough homes. And so when we began talking to them, it's like we need to get through whatever this problem is. We need to make sure our fans are served goal one every single day. But as we go through the process, we should keep our eye on the ball of trying to make sure that we allow more fans to watch more games on the platforms they want to watch them on.
So there has been a conversation, and it was very visible on social media about minor leagues and the minor league players' treatment, their ability to sustain themselves financially while pursuing the ultimate dream,
right?
Reaching the major leagues. The collective bargaining agreement addresses that, but in the process, 40 minor league franchises have been closed down. What is your midterm, long-term view of the longevity and the health of minor league baseball, and what is your priority as the representative of the owners as Commissioner of Baseball?
Well, number one, we have great respect for the communities that have invested in and support minor league baseball on an ongoing basis. I think it's important to put some of the activity that took place in context. When we started the renegotiation of our minor league agreement, the agreement between the major leagues and the minor leagues, our overarching goal had nothing to do with numbers of franchises. It had to do with making sure that the franchises that were being operated where our employees, minor league players are our employees, were working and supposed to be developing, that those franchises had facilities and working conditions that were appropriate
And suitable.
for the development of major league players. That simple. It was really not about eliminating any particular number. It was about eliminating places where the facilities were not adequate for the development of professional players. That was the first step in terms of improving the working conditions for our players. A big piece of it was travel. What was happening is, there'd be a franchise in a particular league. They'd get a better offer from some city 500 miles away, and instead of a 40-mile bus ride, now you had a 500-mile ride. Right. So there were a lot of problems that needed to be addressed. I think the outlook for minor league baseball is really stable and bright. We're committed to 120 minor league franchises under 10-year licenses, so nothing's going to happen while those licenses are out there. I also would point out that I think with the exception of 2 or 3 who turned down options, all of those 40 cities got some form of baseball that was associated with us. They were college wood bat leagues or development leagues that we were running. And in a lot of those places, the quality of play was better and they actually drew more people. Okay. So the idea that there was less baseball kind of overblown, I think, in the press. Minor league baseball continues to play obviously a crucial role in our development process, but an important role in the marketing of the game. For a lot of people, their live baseball option is minor league baseball.
Before we go, we've got about 2 minutes. I want to get your thoughts on diversity, equity, inclusion, and executives who are coming into this game who represent that.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
Look, I think it's been a priority for us. Our diversity efforts begin on the field. We have invested heavily in youth participation, particularly in underserved areas. That investment has changed the complexion of our draft. We have about 6.5% of our major league players are African American now. Our draft the last few years has been double that number in terms of African Americans. Many of those players coming out of programs that we fund and pay for. Secondly, I think it's sometimes in baseball, because of Jackie Robinson and the legacy, we think about diversity only in terms of African Americans. We have a very diverse player workforce,
no
right?
doubt.
I mean, very diverse.
And becoming more diverse in front offices.
Yeah, and front offices, we really have the same approach that we've taken with respect to players. You begin developing more African American players at the grassroots level. We are huge believers in the idea that we need to focus on our entry-level system into employment at the game. We have a great relationship, for example, with the Jackie Robinson Foundation. We in the clubs sponsor 30 Jackie Robinson Foundation scholars every year. Why do we do that? We do that because it's a great source of diverse talent for us.
In organizations.
Yeah, 100%. And we have taken a very industry-wide approach to career pathing in baseball. We've tried to identify high potential diverse candidates at our organization, at clubs, lower level people, and tried to develop career paths, training programs that rounds them out and puts them in a position to move up through the organization they're with or with another organization. We've actually marketed those high potential individuals across the industry. And you know, it is important. The last piece on diversity that we really do, the role of women in baseball, you know, has changed dramatically in the last few years. Their on-field presence, unbelievable. Having our first female GM, Kim Ang, down with the Marlins, really, really important milestones for baseball.
That's the voice of Rob Manfred. This concludes the Takeout. Stay tuned for your Takeout Outtake Especial coming up in just a second.
We need women to be fans. Women are often the decision makers in terms of how entertainment dollars are spent.
From CBS News, this is The Takeout with Major Garrett.
Welcome to your Takeout Outtake Especial. I'm Major Garrett. Welcome to Major League Baseball headquarters, Midtown Manhattan, New York City. Rob Manfred is our special guest. Mr. Commissioner, you were talking as we ended the show about the role of women in baseball. I read some research somewhat recently that it wasn't known to Major League Baseball until it did some research, but one of your most reliable fan bases is single mothers who like to bring their children to ball games. Right. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think it begins with the nature of our game. We are an everyday game. It is hard to draw, 65 or 70 million people to ballparks every year, one at a time. You need family groups, and we always strive to have a family-friendly product. And the nature of the
a safe space,
right? The nature of the game also allows for interaction between family members in a natural setting, right? It's just a great place to spend time with children.
And as I understand it, sort of your merchandising of jerseys and hats and things had to sort of catch up with this reality that was already going on.
It was a catch-up for us. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The other thing I would say is this, every place, we have invested heavily in youth participation since I've been commissioner. It is the number one way to build fans. Kids that play become fans. Every place we do baseball, we do softball in parallel. We've also, and this is sort of an interesting phenomenon, started girls playing baseball, identical sports. There's something to that identity of the sport.
Wonderful movie about that.
Exactly. And why do we do that? We do that because we need women to be fans. Women are often the decision makers in terms of how entertainment dollars are spent.
Yep.
And it's something that's a real focus for us.
So I want to ask you something that I'm sure everyone in professional sports thinks about. It's two things. One, sports are one of the last few places where people in America who disagree on almost everything find a place to agree, point one. Point two, all of our society is affected by the public safety issue of gun violence, and I wonder how you think about that, making the stadiums safe, making the atmosphere safe, and understanding that sports are one of these places where we can still, though we disagree about lots of other things, feel we can cheer for the same thing inside a stadium.
Our number one priority, you kind of hit 1 and 2, right? And in which order you put them, hard. But we want and try to conduct our affairs on and off the field in a way that makes everyone feel comfortable coming to our stadiums. We don't care what people's politics are, what their religion. We want everyone to feel welcome and inclusive in our ballpark atmosphere, and we work very hard in order to maintain that. I think kind of 1 and 1A with that is the physical safety of our fans. We have a great central security department here at Major League Baseball. They are actively involved in monitoring particular situations, but maybe more importantly, in terms of driving best practices down into the individual 30 markets. And, probably the bedrock of that safety effort, our clubs, you feel it when you go into ballparks, have ongoing deep relationships with local law enforcement.
You must worry about this, though.
Oh, you do. I mean, of course you do. I mean, you can't gather people and not be cognizant.
And sometimes, I will tell you this, Mr. Commissioner, I go to a baseball game and I go through the mag and everything's outside and I'm like, there's a street and all of us are standing out here. And if somebody was really crazed, we are sitting ducks.
Yeah, it's.
I think about that. I wonder if you think about that.
Look, we do. We think about gathering points and how many
Egress
people,
and coming in and
try
out.
to move people in and out
More rapidly.
And real professionals, far more qualified than I. To think about those points where we should do a better job. You see it in our ballparks too. The perimeter creation you talked about Fenway. You see it around, and all of that is about doing everything possible
to create a safer
to
space.
ensure that you have a safer space.
So we have these questions we ask all of our guests, but I'm going to kind of truncate them a little bit because I just want to talk to you about movies and your favorite baseball movies.
Okay.
What are they?
Favorite baseball movies, easy. It was true before we went to Iowa, but if you go to Iowa, like I have twice, it's pretty easy. Field of Dreams is the winner on that front. I mean, I have to tell you, Kevin Costner's performance for us in the first Iowa game, one of the most exciting things I've ever seen in a ballpark.
Mm-hmm. What would be next on your baseball movie list?
Probably Pride of the Yankees. I grew up a Yankee fan. My dad was a huge Yankee fan. I mean, and it was a movie he really liked.
Then Bull Durham, right?
I like Bull Durham. I'm a movie person. I really am.
Then Bull Durham. I'll just finish the list for you. Then Bull Durham. Then Sandlot.
Yeah.
That would be my top four. Anyway, Mr. Commissioner, great to spend time with you. Thanks for all the information and perspective. I love baseball. America loves baseball. It's my show. I get to say that. It's all true. We'll see you next week.